Hello, my name is Emma Russo and I'm very excited to meet you in this format for Chat Physics Live 2021. So I'm going to be talking to you about girls in physics, what we can learn from research and practical application for the classroom. So this is not going to be comprehensive, but the idea is that you go away with a few practical things that you can do perhaps differently, or just to be conscious about in terms of your practice, to be able to enable girls in your classroom or to feel more comfortable or to get more girls into physics. So just a little bit about me. So I am an assistant head teacher and director of STEM at South Hampstead High School in North London. Those are my contact details there if you want to get in touch with me at any point. And I guess you might be thinking, well, what qualifies you to talk about this? I have been teaching for 8 years. I've taught in state and independent schools in co-educational and single-sex environments, and a project called Girls in Physics that I'll talk to you about a little bit later on, led to me being chosen as one of the top 50 teachers for the Global Teacher Prize in 2019, which was amazing, and also being given the Daphne Jackson Medal by the Institute of Physics last year, which was a real honour. Like I said, I've taught a few different schools. I did Teach First, and I've been quite involved with Teach for All, which is a global network of teachers too. So I'm just going to start off by talking briefly about some of the challenges and barriers for girls engaging with STEM. So there are lots of issues, but you know, these are some picked out by this fantastic piece of research by Sarah Chapman and Rebecca Vivian in 2016. It's done in Australia, but they're very applicable and kind of are very similar to what other pieces of research have found out in the UK. So there is a real fear of failure and lack of confidence with a lot of young girls in STEM. There's a perceived lack of relevance to everyday life, so the idea of STEM subjects being an abstract concept. There's a real issue with parents and caregivers having a lack of understanding and therefore a lack of support towards STEM pathways. And I think if you teach physics, you'll really recognise this, that you'll always have a parent, every parent's evening, who says, you know, I am rubbish at physics, or I just never understood it. And there's also a lot of misconceptions and stereotypes around these industries and professions, which get in the way of girls being able to progress with them or feeling like they're able to do them. There's a lack of funds as well to access the opportunities for disadvantaged girls. So particularly if you are from a lower income background, you are much less likely to end up in a STEM job than your peers in a higher socioeconomic group. There are a lack of role models in STEM industries because we've got this kind of leaky pipeline for women throughout post-secondary education in academia and also these industries, particularly in those kind of leadership jobs. And that is further exacerbated if you are talking about women of colour, if you're talking about LGBT women, if you're talking about disabled women. Those numbers really drop down and there's very few role models. So there are real challenges in that pipeline to enable those women to survive and to thrive in those careers, which means that we end up with that issue. And then another issue is that there is a real kind of lack of clarity on STEM careers. So my sister, for example, is an engineer, which means something really different in the US, where she now works. But in the UK, we often think of an engineer as being someone that you call out to fix your heating, and those are different types of jobs and different activities. So sometimes that can be really unclear what the distinction is between these different jobs, and where studying STEM subjects and physics for our purposes can take you. So the first question that often gets asked with a lot of these issues are, does teacher gender matter? So the short answer is no. A lot of the time people think that you need to have more female physics teachers, and that's great. That's wonderful. We do want more female physics teachers, but in terms of encouraging girls to follow their passions and continue their further study of physics, the research of the Institute of Physics shows that that doesn't have an effect. It is excellent, enthusiastic teachers who are the key. And what that means is it means we need more physics specialists in the profession, full stop. We need science teachers who have more training in physics, and we need more qualified physicists to become teachers and to be put into that pipeline. It does mean that male and physics teachers teachers of all genders need to be aware of the challenges and need to be ready to tackle them. So whilst the majority of physics teachers are still men, and that doesn't affect the uptake from girls in A-level and in higher education of physics, male or female, you do need to be ready to tackle the issues and be fully trained. And that training and support means that needs to be put in place in departments, in schools, and in schools is something I'll come on to. So just from the IAP, the really key determinants of how students feel towards physics are how they see themselves in relation to the subject, so both now and in the future. Their experience of school physics, has it been a positive one? Have they engaged with it? And a personally supportive physics teacher. So that's what I'm just saying about the idea that teachers of all genders need to be aware of the challenges that could be facing girls as a result of their upbringing in our society and be ready to tackle them. So I just want to say, as I'm going through some of these ideas, there's no single solution. There are lots of different areas in which we can try and do something. It's action in lots of areas that will make a real impact, and there isn't just a single immediate solution. So whole school gender equality is something that the Institute of Physics have really shown through a series of papers, including this Improving Gender Balance one in 2017, makes the most significant difference. So I don't know about you, but if you are someone who is passionate about equality in physics, and in particular with this gender equality, sometimes you might feel like you're the physics teacher just kind of banging the drum saying we need to think about this, we need to be aware of it, we need to take action. But actually the IAP have shown that we need to have someone in the senior leadership team who really makes sure that this is a school-wide, it is of school-wide importance. So we all need to be working towards whole school initiatives that work towards equality in our school community. And we need to make sure that that's on the agenda at the senior leadership level, because if you have a school community where not many girls are taking up physics, it's also likely that you have a school community where not many boys are taking up theatre studies, for example. And I don't need to go into it here, but all the research shows that diversity, all types of diversity, are better for outcomes. So it is something that we should want to move towards. I just want to flag up these two books as some reading. So Angela Saini is a fantastic science journalist and author. She wrote Inferior and Superior. So Inferior kind of takes you through all of the popular science that people like to refer to say, well, this is what the difference between men and women are and how they behave differently. And really just shows how a lot of the time those studies are very small, or they are very flawed, or they don't actually show what we tend to think, or they get portrayed in the media as having shown, and how these things have become really embedded in our culture so that we think that there are these scientific differences between men and women that actually don't really exist. And then Superior is a fantastic book which is kind of doing the same thing but with race science, and she talks about eugenics and the real dangerous and scary rise of some of these attitudes that are really embedded within science and the scientific community in terms of race and prejudice and discrimination, and both of them are just fantastically written. And I think as scientists who are watching this, you will really appreciate these books and the stories that are in them, and I think it will really change your attitudes about a few different things. A few more things that we can be doing in the classroom. So these all come from the Institute of Physics recommendations from their various pieces of research and publications that they've put out there. So using student names and removing gendered language is really important. So I know that when you go to work in a single sex school, suddenly you might say, group people together and you say, girls, do this, or boys, stop talking. But as soon as you are in a mixed environment, or you have a mixed group of children, say doing what you want or not doing what you want, they are suddenly able to be grouped in your mind because you suddenly do come up with a word. And I think just trying to do that removes you just seeing someone as that gender and them being grouped by that. Consider who you're asking to do which tasks. So you know, there's very little difference between the strength of a 13-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy. So do you need someone strong to help you lift this, and then you get Mark to do it? Actually use the people in your children in your classroom, you know, consider them as individuals rather than by gender, and stop grouping by gender. Gender is often kind of the least interesting and least important thing about us in the context of whether we're able to do something. So, you know, that book that I just referred to by Angela Saini with Inferior, I hope would really emphasize that to you if you read it. So stop doing a challenge as girls versus boys. Why not do you know, those who are born in an odd month versus those who are born in an even month? You know, there are more interesting and more relevant, or, you know, just completely subjective ways of grouping people. So just challenge yourself to try that if that's something that you've been doing. Unconscious bias training is something that is really important. It enables us to see how the experiences might be different for girls and for boys, and then what we can do to manage that. So, as I said, the science shows us that there aren't statistically significant differences between men and women, their skill sets. But we are brought up differently, and therefore that has an impact on the way that we interact with things and the way that we might feel. If you just Google Harvard implicit bias test gender science, then you can have a go at this kind of test, and it's just really helpful, I think, to identify within yourself what your biases might be. And I think it's a fantastic thing. I've been part of a school where we audited it as a department, and we had a very helpful discussion. And like I say, this is not something that you can tackle on your own. It's something that you really want to be doing as a department, as a school, to kind of identify and understand what you can work on. You can only make improvements when you understand what your biases are. And then as a result, you know, if you're head of department or something, then we need to be thinking about how do we equip teachers to deal with sexist bullying and language. It is difficult because it can be really ingrained, and I have worked in school cultures where it is, and it's just there in sort of microaggressions and small comments, but it really has an impact. And so we need to work together to make sure that teachers feel supported, that they could act if they witness that going on, and that they'll be taken seriously by, you know, say someone as a head of department or their SLT. So I think it's really important as well to provide girl-only opportunities. So these kind of environments can provide a space where they're not stereotypes, enable them to connect with mentors. So these events that I mentioned earlier, the Girls in Physics events, the idea was to bring together professionals in physics and engineering, female professionals from a real range of careers in academia, and for them to share their experiences kind of growing up through their education and then their professional life. And it was just fantastic. And these events still run as a legacy project, but I'm no longer at that school. And it brought together both young people who were able to make connections with other girls and young women who were maybe, say, the only one in their physics class at their school too, but also female parents and carers who often have this kind of stereotyping in their mind, and you know, mums and their daughters were leaving just kind of saying, oh, this is fantastic, you know, I've never thought of physics like that, or I didn't know about these opportunities. And getting that family involvement is really, really important. I do just want to flag up as well that you have to consider the diversity of speakers within that space. So if you have an event that every time you have speakers that you have only white people presenting, white professionals, or you just, I guess, any sort of group of people is not represented in your speakers, again, you are going to make certain people feel isolated. So I think the reality is that often to make people feel included, you have to over-represent with the kind of diversity of speakers that you bring in, because that's not going to isolate other people, but it is going to bring more people into that fold to feel like they are welcome and like they belong. As I say, I'm whipping through this very quickly because it's a very short time, but a couple more things that are really important and have been shown to have a really significant effect. So research shows that girls consider careers at a younger age than boys. So I think that's a real issue with physics, is because people think if you do physics, you'll become a physicist. So it's not that it's not that girls can't do physics for A-level, they can't do physics at university, but if they're not seeing where it can take them, they've counted themselves out earlier. So it's really important from a very young age that we're putting examples of jobs into lessons and homeworks, that we're showing the impact on people and careers. Because as I say, girls are not necessarily different, but they have been brought up with different expectations. Our society says different things to them. So we want to make sure that they can see the impact of jobs, and therefore they might consider them earlier, or might consider that they're for them and that they might be important. Ways to do this are things like industry visits and experiences, and linking it with scientists. The STEM Ambassador Network is fantastic. You can create a free account and you can just post on there saying, looking for a speaker for year 10 class, an engineer, and you just get amazing scientists come back to you, and I've had some brilliant speakers like that. There's also Skype a Scientist going on at the moment. Also, grounding lessons in student experience is really important. So I just want to be very clear that I am not talking about the things that have sometimes been suggested, like making things more stereotypically girly. I'm saying that for people who are less likely to consider physics as a career or an option, or not being for them, and that is more likely to be girls in our current society, making it more relevant and grounding it in their own experience will have an impact. So, for example, the NPL had this great measuring the speed of sound with toilet rolls. When you're talking about circular motion and things moving around, talking about a centrifuge and separating blood, the technology that they've got in their own hands, a density rainbow is something that I only discovered recently, and is a fantastic at-home science practical that people can do. Those connections have a real impact in making people feel like the science and the physics is relevant to them. Lastly, beyond school, there's a number of things that it's really important to do. So I'm not going to talk about these in detail, but it would make a real difference if technology and engineering were in the national curriculum for science. And these are things that I really saw when I was observing in schools in Sweden, and kind of did a piece of research on that for Teach for All. It's really noticeable that reducing hierarchical structures for teaching staff makes a difference. Don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but it's certainly very powerful in countries like Sweden, where they have a greater uptake of women as professional engineers. Changing highly subject-specific dependent university offers. So, for example, girls often really struggle with their A-level choices when they have to take physics and maths as 2 out of their 4 or 2 out of their 3. So changing that link could make a real difference. And widening subject choices for year 12 and 13. So I really noticed in Sweden that you carry on with a much broader study, which means that different university paths are open to you still, and you haven't kind of cut down. We're one of the countries in the world that really slims down your choices very early. And then lastly, you have to do everything that is within your power to achieve equality. It's all very well and good in your classroom, try not to call people by certain names, but we need to be voting for the politicians that will put these things into law. We need to be making changes society-wide. As I said, when I went to observe in schools in Sweden, I noticed all these things, but the biggest thing was laws in the country have changed societal attitudes that have had an impact on gender equality. And that is true with all types of equality as well. I believe that we have to advocate for that, and we have to act, not just in the classroom, to make sure that happens. So I hope you've enjoyed that whirlwind tour through. Please get in touch with any questions if you would like. So I'm at MMA London on Twitter, or that's my website there, mmarusso.com, and there's a contact form. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone's talks as well. Bye-bye.